Welcome into this edition of Hand Raised Guys, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. I'm Neal McCready. Today on the show, three guests, three interviews that we'll bring to you, covering a myriad of topics. Chase Parham of MPW Digital, rebelgrove.com, sits down with Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball. They talk about the big series this weekend in Oxford between fifth-ranked Tennessee and top-ranked Ole Miss. That series gets started on Friday night, 6:30 p.m. Saturday's a 7 o'clock game. And then the series finale Sunday afternoon at 1:30. So Chase and Kendall talk about that series and more. Ole Miss held its pro day on Wednesday. I talked to Neal Stratton of Inside the League about some of the Ole Miss prospects, what he thinks about Matt Corral, Sam Williams, Jerry and Ely, and others. We talk about some NFL topics, especially some of the quarterback carousel that has happened around the National Football League as the NFL gets ready for its draft next month in Las Vegas. And then I also sat down with Dan Mathews of 680 The Fan in Atlanta. We talked about the Falcons, their plans moving forward without Matt Ryan, who is dealt to to Indianapolis, not Detroit, earlier in the week. I apologize to the Ryan family for even scaring them with that even thought. We also talk about the Braves, the Atlanta Braves, the defending world champs, getting ready to get started without Freddie Freeman as their starting first baseman for the first time in a long time. Freddie Freeman now with the Dodgers. The Braves went out and traded for and extended Matt Olson. So we talk about that, Ronald Acuna's health, and some more Braves topics. We also talk about SEC football. Still months away, but it's never too early to talk about the upcoming SEC season as spring football is underway in Oxford and kind of all over the Southeast, all over the country. So we'll get to all of those topics and more. First, I want to tell you that we're brought to you by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. Same great names, same great products, I should say, same great services, just different names. If you are in the Oxford, Tupelo area, get in touch with the people at Comer, 662-801-1777. If you are in the Memphis area, Hernando, South Haven, Olive Branch, DeSoto County, that area, get in touch with the people at Southern. It's 662-429-4429. Don't forget, it's that time of year. If you go outside, you can tell it's still a little chilly at night, that kind of thing. But in the daytime, it's starting to warm up. You can see things getting green. You know the heat is coming. If you've not yet turned on your air conditioner, it won't be long until you do. You want to make sure that it's running in tip-top shape. So get in touch with the people at Comer, the people at Southern. Also, don't forget that those are the guys that are the sponsors of the Troy Brown Show, which will be debuting here in the next week or two, I think. The transfer portal linebacker from Central Michigan in line to be the starting linebacker for Ole Miss. We're doing a show with him throughout the 2022 football season. That show made possible by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. So please, if you are in the market for air conditioning, heating needs, that kind of thing, make sure that Comer and Southern are the call that you make. We would appreciate it. They would too. That's sort of, people always ask, how can I support your podcast? That's how. You can support sponsors who have been good to us for a long time, and it certainly is the case with Comer and Southern. This will be the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast, the Oxford Exxon Highway 6 West in Oxford, just next door to the Oxford Crystal. If you're coming in for the weekend to see the Rebels and the Vols, coming in for spring football, whatever the case may be, make sure that you fill up at the Oxford Exxon. Take a picture on social media, tag us, tag Oxford Exxon. Ben Craddock and the people there at the Oxford Exxon would certainly appreciate it. We would as well. Always clean, always great services, great place to grab a snack, grab a soda, a frozen daiquiri, whatever the case may be there at the Oxford Exxon, Highway 6 West in Oxford. I'm in the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford is in Amory, Mississippi. 662-257-1900 is the number. Call it. Ask for Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours. It's right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote. The rest is completely up to you. You can shop that quote around. You can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. 662-257-1900. Great service, great product. Corey wants to be your car guy. He wants to be your truck guy. You'll find out what that means when you make that call. Again, 662-257-1900. Kendall Rogers, Neal Stratton, Dan Mathews all join us on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Rafters Music and Food on the Square in Oxford. Great place if you're coming in this weekend enjoying some of the festivities and the ball games and the practices and stuff, go grab a burger, a po' boy, an appetizer, great beer selection, full bar, all of that and more at Rafters Music and Food on the Square in Oxford. Also Rafters in New Albany. If you're in or around New Albany, make sure that you make Rafters a part of your day there. Let's see, what else do I want to get to before we get to this? Oh, yeah, NCAA tournament getting started tonight as we record this at 5:47. NCAA tournament starting in about 25 minutes. Gonzaga and Arkansas in a Sweet 16 game. You got Duke and Texas Tech later from San Francisco. 2 other games as well. If you want to bet on those games, bet on the rest of the Sweet 16, the Elite 8 later this weekend, the NBA as it winds down its regular season. Go to BroThrow, brothrow.com. It's no juice. Great way to save money over time. Bet with your friends at brothrow.com. Also, don't forget if you're coming in this weekend to Oxford, make sure that you make LB's Meat Market your stop. To stock up, if you're heading home, stock up with the freshest meats. If you've got a place here that it's difficult sometimes to get a restaurant reservation in Oxford. If you want to get the freshest cuts of meat, celebrate before the game, after the game, over the course of the weekend, go to LB's, 2008 University Avenue in Oxford, right across from Kroger, but there's no reason to go to Kroger except to use it as a landmark. Go to LB's, the freshest cuts of beef, pork, chicken, seafood, great sausages, everything you're looking for, phenomenal service from Greg Jones and all the people there at LB's Meat Market, again, 2008 University Avenue in Oxford. So, again, Ole Miss and Tennessee this weekend in Oxford, big SEC weekend series. Tennessee 3-0 in the league after sweeping South Carolina. Ole Miss 2-1 in the league after taking 2 of 3 at Auburn. 2 nationally ranked teams headed at it. 2 teams that have major postseason aspirations. So they'll get together this weekend, 6:30, 7, and 1:30 in Oxford. Chase Parham talked to Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball about that series and more. Here's Chase.
Kendall Rogers, D1Baseball.com, joining us now. Kendall, obviously a big weekend in Oxford, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. 2 teams that have been pretty successful, both in the, top 5 of you guys poll. Ole Miss staying number 1 for the second week in a row. Obviously, when you got circled, just in general, Tennessee. I know it's a gaudy resume. They played the Shriners Classic, won 2 out of 3 over there. Beat up Baylor and Oklahoma pretty good on day 2 and 3 after losing to Texas. For people maybe on my site who haven't followed them much, what's sort of the profile of this team and compared to even last year? I mean, it feels like they really have still taken on Vitello's kind of attitude and personality.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting. I think when you look back at Tennessee last year, we knew them for the pimp jobs with the home runs. We knew them for the power, the versatility top to bottom that lineup. And then you look at the pitching staff with Chad Dallas and those guys. They lost a couple of those kids, but I think the biggest thing when I look at Tennessee is you're right. They've kind of kept that personality going. They've kind of kept that chip on their shoulder going. They're not satisfied. Like they still feel like they have unfinished business. And so, that's the first thing I noticed about them at Shriners a few weeks ago. The next thing is a big thing for them, and we'll talk about the offense in a second, but the big thing for them right now is just their pitching has been excellent. And, I think coming into the season, I actually felt good, Chase, about their bullpen. I thought when you looked at the return of Kirby Cannell, Camden Sewell, Redmond Walsh, those are 3 really old arms. So I actually felt good about their bullpen, but they're getting other guys a step up. Will Mabry's been solid. Mark McLaughlin's been really good for the Vols out of the bullpen. And then when you kind of combine that with the job that Drew Beam and Chase Burns are doing in the weekend rotation, I'll tell you right now, Chase Burns is one of the best freshman pitchers I've ever seen. I saw him pitch at the time, number 1 Texas at Shriners. Like you and I, like if we were in that position, we'd be nervous as hell. And he went out there and he was 95, 98, just a hammer, 86, 89 mile an hour cutter, threw in a couple of changeups, and he looked outstanding. And then on Sunday that weekend, Drew Beam went out there and was 94, 95 with nasty stuff, with a great frame. And then you mix in Chase Dollander, the transfer from Georgia Southern, who started to get a little bit better. The weekend I saw him, his command wasn't very good. But, he's a guy that's in the mid-90s with a pretty good arm. So you're talking about a team that, at least right now, they're very confident in the weekend rotation. They've got a lot of options in the bullpen. And then offensively, when you look at this team top to bottom, I think that's going to stand out to them about you is, they could roll out a brand new lineup of 3 new guys every day. And like, they're not going to skip a beat, like the weekend I saw him, Christian Scott, Christian Moore, I'm trying to think of the kid's name off the top of my head, but the Seth Stevenson, Blake Burke was the one I was thinking of. Blake Burke came off the bench in the last game at Shriners and hit a ball in the second deck. I mean, they're just really, really balanced. And when you combine that with, Trey Lipscomb's having a breakout season, Drew Gilbert obviously is having another powerful season. Jared Dickey's been fantastic. I think he's still hitting well over 400. They're just a really good offensive team. And I would be honest here, Tennessee's really good. I would argue that on a one weekend look, it's hard to imagine a better team in college baseball. Tennessee is really good. It's a good thing that series in Oxford this weekend, because I think that does equalize that series a little bit. I think if it was in Knoxville, I think we'd all kind of agree. It might not go great for the Rebs right now, but it's in Oxford, and it's going to be wild down there.
Some of Ole Miss's problem right now is just health. They look at TJ McCants coming out of the game Saturday against Auburn. He missed the midweek. Mike expects him to play this weekend, but Calvin Harris almost assuredly still going to be out. Kevin Graham is definitely out for a few more weeks from that wrist thumb injury that he's had. So Ole Miss is banged up offensively a little bit. I want to mention Burns specifically, because he's been so damn impressive. What is the profile? What is Ole Miss going to see from this kid on Friday?
Yeah, the biggest thing with him, he's got a great frame. I mean, I have to look at the number, but I want to say 6'3", 6'4", about 225. Like, he has no business being in college baseball. Like, he's just one of those kids that had a big number. He wanted to play college baseball, so this is where he's at. He's in Knoxville. And, what's really interesting about Chase to kind of see his evolution is when you look back at fall workouts, when I talked to Tony Vitello, it was kind of one of those deals like Chase Burns threw really hard. That's what we knew. And the command in the fall wasn't great. And so the question mark with Chase kind of coming into the season was, we know that he has a big time arm, but can he command it? And so far this year, he's done a really nice job. You're talking about a guy with 34 strikeouts, 9 walks, and I think it's 26 2/3 innings. Mm-hmm. Teams are hitting 152 against him. That's pretty good for a freshman. You could really make the argument right now that him or Carter Holton, another freshman out of the Volunteer State, are the 2 top freshman pitchers and maybe the 2 top freshmen in college baseball right now. Those guys to me have been like the pitching version of what Jacob Gonzalez was positionally last year.
What is the deal with Tidwell? Where is he kind of at right now with his situation?
So that's a scary thing about Tennessee is, they asked Tony actually yesterday, the media availability about Tidwell. And he had told me at Shriners a few weeks ago, he's definitely coming back. And, Tony's one of those guys that, like, if a kid's not definitely coming back, he's not just going to say he's coming back. Like, he's not going to be deceiving about it. And he said at the time, I think he's going to come back. It's going to be a little bit longer, but he's going to come back. And, he announced yesterday that Tidwell is on track to come back in 2 or 3 weeks. So, I mean, again, if this offense continues at this rate, we know they have the bullpen. And let's say Burns and Beam continue. And oh, by the way, Chase Dollander ends up being your Tuesday guy, or Drew Beam ends up being your Tuesday guy with Blade Tidwell in the rotation. I mean, that's an insanely loaded team. And we're not even talking about Seth Halverson, the Missouri transfer who's supposed to come back, who was Missouri's Friday guy last year, and he's hurt. So, I mean, he's another 93 to 95 arm with a nasty slider. And so they would then have starting options of Drew Beam, Tidwell, Chase Burns, Chase Dollander, Seth Halverson. I mean, that's really good.
I know it's a lot of – I know some in-state guys. I know there's a little whatever. But, we don't think of Tennessee necessarily as, LSU or Vanderbilt from a recruiting standpoint. I mean, they have a little more of a lottery help than Ole Miss or Mississippi State – or not Mississippi State anymore, but Ole Miss does. What's allowed him to sort of accumulate this quickly in Knoxville? I mean, what's happened to get here for Tennessee and Vitello?
Well, the thing about Tony, and to give him a lot of credit, is Tony was kind of a self-made guy when he was at Missouri. His dad's like a legendary high school coach. He knows exactly what's needed as a coach. And when you combine kind of that natural recruiting acumen with the coaching knowledge, that's a great combination. He's got a really good staff. Josh Elander learned under Jim Schlossnagle at TCU as a player. Frank Anderson has been one of the top pitching coaches in college baseball, has learned under Augie Garrido, Larry Hayes at Texas Tech. He's a head coach at Oklahoma State, so he kind of knows all the different aspects of a program. So you've got a staff that's well-versed on the coaching side and on the recruiting side. And the thing about Tennessee is, like, their team has taken on this persona. Like, they go after a certain kid. They go after a kid, whether he's ultra talented or he needs to be developed. They go after a kid that has something to prove. Like, he has a bone to pick with somebody, like he's got a chip on his shoulder. And the best comparison I can make is kind of old school Cal State Fullerton. And if you remember those old school Fullerton teams, I mean, when you went and played them, it was like you're going to a boxing match. Like, like they, it's like I told somebody the other day, they're like, Tennessee's going to roll into Swayze with their chest bumped out, probably smack talking the fans in the outfield. Like, that's just the kind of the persona they have. And they're not bad kids, but like, they feel like the world disrespects them. Like the world doesn't think they're as good as Ole Miss or State or LSU. And
it reminds me of Louisville a little bit when Dan's had really good teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it reminds me of Louisville now. I mean, Louisville's a really, really physical offensive team. And when they hit home runs, they enjoy it. And so, I get it. Like opposing fans don't like it, but I tell you what, the formula works. And Tony's a really, really good recruiter.
What's your 10,000 feet view of Ole Miss at this point?
I think they're a team that, especially when they get Kevin back, I just think Kevin, when you look at the number of at-bats he's had in that league, that's just such a experienced, powerful piece to have in that lineup. I think once they get him back, they've been hitting, but like once they get him back, they kind of finalizes everything offensively. I think the big thing for me is just how the starting rotation evolves. For instance, right now, I mean, if you just looked at a piece of paper, you'd go, man, Tennessee, advantage Chase Burns, Tennessee advantage Drew Beam, and you could go either way on probably Dollander. But like that's the thing about Ole Miss is like if they want to get to Omaha, compete for a national championship, they need to the rotation is going to have to be better. Like John Gaddis has to continue to get better. Derek Diamond, and you kind of alluded to earlier about the offseason stuff, but he's one of those guys that I've seen him really, really good. For them to meet their goals, he's going to have to be really, really good. And I don't know, how Laff or Bianco kind of tap into that and get that out of him. Maybe a series like this weekend is what can kind of get that out of him. And so I think Derek Diamond's like the X factor. Like when he's on, he's got the best stuff of anybody in this rotation on the staff by far. He's the big key for me.
Twitter loves him. This Joyce kid for Tennessee. Is there any pitchability with this 103-mile-an-hour fastball?
It's really funny that I actually mentioned all these arms and didn't mention the guy that throws 104. But, so it's interesting. I was talking to Tony about this a while back. And the thing about Joyce is they're trying to just get him to learn how to pitch. So, he's always been one of those guys that throws 104, 101, 102, 103, but like he's never had any pitchability. But like when they put him in there this year, there's been times that he's actually been able to throw strikes with like 2 pitches. Like he's also has a slider. And so, right now I think he has, 3 walks in 7 innings. And, Tony doesn't give him a big leash. Like if he starts at a count 3-0, like Tony will not hesitate. He'll walk out there and take the ball from him. Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of those things like they know exactly what they're going to get in that first batter. And if he kind of gets rolling, they keep him in there. But I tell you what, it is firm. I mean, it's legit. I saw him at Shriners, on their TrackMan system, on my radar gun. It's legitimately 100 to 103.
It feels like you're picking the Vols to take 2 this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Vols to take 2 out of 3, but it's a tough one because I do think Swayze's an equalizer. When that place is rocking, when that place is packed in the outfield, especially with a team as talented as Ole Miss is, they're a hard team to beat. And, I wonder how Dollander, well, you could throw Dollander in there, but I wonder how Burns and Beam are going to handle that atmosphere. The thing about it, when they went to Shriners, like Texas had a big crowd there, but it wasn't Swayze on a Saturday afternoon. So it's going to be a little different. I like Tennessee, but would a Ole Miss series victory surprise me? Not in the least. I mean, they are number 1 in the country.
A little bit of a quick lightning round. You like, end of the day, Vanderbilt or Arkansas more?
I like Vanderbilt right now. I think Vanderbilt has a little bit more upside on the mound as of right now. Arkansas is getting better. Jackson Wiggins, keep an eye on him. He's been really good. Of course, we remember him last year hitting 98. Kind of like you were talking about with Joyce, you weren't always real sure where Jackson was going to throw it, but he's finally starting to show command again. So keep an eye on him. Connor Nolan's been big for the Hogs as well. I just think Vanderbilt, when you look at a position group, Davis Diaz, another freshman, has been really good. Dom Keegan's been outstanding. I want to say Dom's hitting well over 400. Carter Young's healthy and starting to figure it out again at the shortstop position. Then you have Enrique Bradfield to go with that pitching staff, and McElvain, and of course Carter Holton. So I like where Vandy's at. Vandy hasn't lost since like the second day of the season. So, they lost the series finale. So they haven't lost since the 3rd day of the season. So we'll see what happens kind of moving forward.
What is sort of your guess on where State ends up at this point? Can they fix this at all, or is it just kind of what it is?
I mean, until I'm proven otherwise, I mean, it kind of is what it is, right? Like the same issues they had opening weekend. are the same issues they have now. And that was even with Landon healthy opening weekend. And so I'd say without Landon Sims, the thing about, like, I love Preston Johnson as a reliever. I have concerns about Preston Johnson as a starting pitcher long-term. Like, he looked pretty good for 6 innings the other day against Georgia, but like, you're asking that guy to go out there and be Landon Sims, and I don't think he's Landon Sims. And so they're going to have to get it done offensively, and they did on Sunday against Georgia. We'll see if that was kind of the spark they needed. But I mean, I think right now, I think Mississippi State's going to be one of those teams that's going to be fighting just to get in the tournament. And if they can get in the tournament, I mean, they have the players to make a run.
LSU better or worse, or as expected so far?
Oh, by far worse. I still think they're really offensive, but they make entirely too many pitching changes. By the way, when Ole Miss plays them, it's going to drive you crazy. They will change pitchers 7 or 8 times guaranteed. Okay. And the other thing is they're playing bad defense. They're making errors on routine plays. They're not covering bases right. Like, there's a play at Shriners where they didn't cover third when the runner was running to third on like a grounder. Like, just really stupid stuff. And so until they figure that out, which they have to go to Gainesville this weekend, that's a bad place to figure yourself out. I'm really down on them. I think they're going to be really offensive. They have a lot of question marks. I mean, they should have gotten swept last week. A&M left 15 guys on base in the series finale, and LSU needed a walk-off to win it.
Can you make the argument that past Arkansas and Tennessee, A&M is maybe Ole Miss's toughest series? They don't play Florida, Georgia, or Vanderbilt.
You maybe ask me about A&M in a couple of weeks. A&M early in the season was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Nate Yeske, their pitching coach, who came from Arizona and obviously did a great job at Oregon State. Like, he's done a really good job of that rotation, but their bullpen is a disaster at times. Like, it's not like they're not talented. They have a lot of guys that are unproven. A lot of young guys are relying on. And as you well know, you've been covering this a long time. When you've got young guys out there coming out of the bullpen to, quell a rally, it doesn't always go well. So they are doing a lot better offensively. They knocked the cover off the ball at LSU. We'll find out this weekend against Auburn, who, Auburn's not bad. They're not great, but they're not terrible. We'll find out this weekend against Auburn, was the LSU series, the way they hit, an aberration, or are they starting to kind of figure them things out? The big thing to watch with them, and he'll be back by the time Ole Miss plays them, but Trevor Werner, who's off to just a torrid start for them offensively, he's been on the shelf for a few weeks with a hamate bone injury. He's supposed to come back in, I think, a couple of weeks. I want to say Ole Miss plays him in late April, right?
They do, yeah.
So they'll see him.
Last thing, I know you got to go. Ole Miss gets Tennessee, and then they get Alabama, Kentucky to kind of get healthy no matter what happens this weekend before a trip to South Carolina. What are we making of the Gamecocks? Tennessee whipped them pretty good, but they did get Texas a couple weeks ago.
I think the Texas deal was like a case of, like, the first weekend that Texas didn't have Tanner Witt, and they got him in a doubleheader. I think this is what it all boiled down to. Matthew Becker did throw really well for them that day. He has a talented young arm for the Gamecocks. So with him and Will Sanders, if you don't show up, they can't beat you in a series. But I actually, outside of this weekend, I actually kind of like Ole Miss's schedule, the way it sets up the next few weeks. Even if they have a bad weekend against Tennessee, like, it sets up very well to kind of quickly rebound.
Kendall, appreciate it as always. I know
you got it, buddy.
Go get your kid. Appreciate it, buddy.
You got it. Thanks. Appreciate it, Chase.
That was Kendall Rogers, Chase Parham. Again, Ole Miss, Tennessee this weekend, 6:30, 7 and 1:30 at Swayze, the Vols, the Rebels. A big baseball series. Chase will be covering it throughout the weekend. We'll talk about it on Monday on the Oxford Exxon podcast. Earlier this week, Ole Miss had its pro day. Matt Corral threw for the first time in front of scouts, in front of NFL execs, 4 head coaches, 71, 72 NFL reps, 31 teams, everyone but the Los Angeles Rams represented in Oxford. All eyes on Matt Corral, Sam Williams, Jerry Neely, Snoop Connor, and the rest of the pro day group. Talked about that and a lot more of NFL topics with Neal Stratton of Inside the League, based out of Houston. Here's Neal. My longtime friend Neal Stratton of Inside the League, kind enough to literally kind of hop off the road and spend some time with us here today. Neal, first, thanks for spending some time with us. How you been?
I'm good, man. Always a pleasure. Honored to be here. What's better than talking football with a buddy, right?
That's right. All right, let's start here. We're taping this on Wednesday afternoon. I just got back from Ole Miss's pro day. A lot of eyes on Matt Corral. So we'll kind of start there. I know there's some other guys that I want to get your thoughts on, but we'll start with Matt. Got hurt in the Sugar Bowl, didn't throw at the combine. From just watching him right in front of me a little while ago, I mean, he hasn't lost the arm strength. It looks like he's put a little weight on. He looked looked healthy. Mike Tomlin was there watching him pretty closely. Matt Rule was watching pretty closely. There were other guys there as well, 4 NFL head coaches. What are kind of your thoughts about where Matt Corral is here about a month out from the draft?
Well, Neal, I think in 5 years, Corral's the best quarterback in this class. And that's no disrespect to Malik Willis. That's no disrespect to the Panthers, the Pitt quarterback. I just think that his body of work has been very impressive. He's done it in the SEC. He's got the mobility that I think most teams are looking for now. He's not, 6'5" or whatever, but I don't think that matters anymore, quite frankly. And if his ankle's good or his leg, or I can't remember, what was it exactly he hurt?
It was ankle. It was his ankle.
Yeah.
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching that game and I was heartbroken that he got hurt because I really was looking for him to really have a big performance. But I think he's got a lot going for him, and I think that if everything checks out, he's a top half of the round player in a draft where I don't think any NFL teams feel like I gotta have this quarterback or that quarterback, but because of the inflation that's part of the position and the rules now that are so laden towards the offense, I think you've got to make investments for players like that. And so I think he's gonna be really happy on draft day.
What do you think? And I'm like you. I don't want to say anything that comes across as an insult to Malik Willis, who seems like a perfectly nice guy and got a big body and a big arm, and he's athletic and all that. But he didn't do it at the SEC level the way that Corral did. Why do you think so many in the media, at least at this point, are as kind of infatuated with Willis as they are, almost to Corral's detriment? I don't know that it really matters at the end of the day what the media thinks.
Right.
In fact, I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But why do you think that is?
Right.
There's such an infatuation with Malik Willis.
I think there are a couple of reasons. I think number one, I think everyone's looking for that guy to kind of come out of nowhere and be, a future star. And Liberty is it's an FBS program, but it's not Alabama or Pitt or LSU or whatever. It's not a program that is instantly recognizable as a force. And so to some degree, I think he's got that a little bit of underdog to him. I think that's one factor. I think the other is that he had a really nice Senior Bowl. And I think he was the quarterback that really stepped forward the most of anyone that was there based on the conversations that I had. And I think in a draft where everyone's kind of waiting for someone to ascend, that's as good a coronation as you're going to get. I don't think that the combine necessarily was a place where anyone really asserted themselves, and we're still kind of getting the returns back from the pro days, et cetera. But I think it's really I think his candidacy as a top quarterback, if he turns out to be the first one selected, kind of rests on those two, on the shoulders of those 2 points, if you ask me.
Kenny Pickett from Pitt had a really good Senior Bowl as well. And that is such a big game down there, especially for quarterbacks. They get to work with an NFL coaching staff for a week, and everyone's watching, and you're running NFL practices and that kind of thing. How big of a deal is the whole hand size thing with him? What do you expect there? You watched him in Mobile. You've seen him other places. What do you think of him?
I mean, I'm sick of hearing about it. What's been interesting to me, and I don't mean to evade your question, has been the gamesmanship, not getting his hands measured in Mobile, and the big and then at the Senior Bowl. I mean, at the combine, and now it was almost like headlines of what size his hands were. Drew Brees didn't have very big hands. He had a pretty nice career, and I think it's been overblown. But I guess you can never be too cautious, and everyone's looking for that one dig on the top players. And when you've got as much riding on this and you're trying to basically defend your candidacy as the top quarterback in the draft, I guess he wanted to be, to go the extra mile, at least his management team did. And so I don't know. I think I don't know if an NFL team really their opinion on him is going to hinge on his hand size per se, but it is part of the whole draft picture. And so I guess nothing's off the table anymore.
You called it the underwear Olympics, and I love the league, and you've made a living off of working with the league and agents and stuff. But this deal where the bowls end roughly the 10th of January, and it's a 3.5 month drawn out process. How many NFL teams, these are smart people, some of them, how many of them just end up making mistakes based on the underwear Olympics of these pro days and stuff? Because literally today, and you're hearing this on Thursday, so on Wednesday at Ole Miss's pro day, I'm watching Jalen Jones, who I've covered now. I think Jalen was at Ole Miss for 12 years. I covered Jalen for, I don't know, 5-6 years, and runs his 40. My man has on a pair of essentially underwear and cleats. And I'm not knocking Jalen, because if I looked like Jalen does, I would walk everywhere I went in underwear and tennis shoes, probably not cleats, because that would make a lot of noise. But if I looked like him, I might wear the cleats so that people heard me coming. I'd want, if I had that body, I'd walk around. But my point is that you're not going to play an NFL game in underwear and cleats. You're going to play in pads and a helmet and the whole deal. How many mistakes get made based on these pro days and the combine and workout warriors and stuff like that, as opposed to the old school, hey, I'm going to look at film, I'm going to see what this guy did on the football field and translate how that goes from Saturday to Sunday?
When I watch the draft broadcast, it drives me crazy, because after the pick is made and Goodell's hugged the kid and all those kind of things, and they go back to the team headquarters, and the headline is always, hey, you got your guy. And I always wonder, was that who you went into the draft wanting, or was that the guy that was left when you picked and you're like, I guess? To me, to answer your question, I think that these times are used to separate two very closely aligned players, on days 1 and 2, especially days 1 and 2. But in day 3, I think teams are more apt to try to hit a home run. And so if you've got a guy who really blew up his workout, even if the film doesn't really match, if you've got a crusty old defensive lineman and you had a guy that just went out and ran a 4.6 at 275 or something, and you really feel like we can turn this guy into something because he came from the Sun Belt and he only played defense 1 year, that's when you're starting to use those times more so. And I think everyone's looking for that guy that could be a difference maker, could be a mismatch kind of guy. And so to me, that's the way a wise team uses these times. Now, I got to tell you, Neal, you talk to people just like I do. There's no two teams that do this exactly the same way. And I think that's part of what makes the draft fun. I mean, if it was all very rote and scientific and all those kinds of things, there wouldn't be a lot of suspense to it. But because people do things differently, that's why we're all glued to the TV all day, all evening, Friday and Thursday, and then all day Saturday. So, pinning it down is hard to do, but I think generally it's got a lot more importance later in the draft, because you're trying to separate those guys that are kind of close, but may be lightning in a bottle,
I'm curious, because this well, because you're part of you've followed the draft process really closely over the last 20 years or so. When the Mike Tomlins and the Matt Rules, Arthur Smiths, naming the guys who are here today, Mike McCarthy, when those guys bring these quarterbacks in, right? They bring in Pickett and they bring in Willis and they bring in Corral. We'll just leave it at those three. Maybe they bring in Sam Howell, whatever the case is. And they sit down with them. They've seen them work out. Maybe they work them out or whatever. But those conversations, what are they looking for? Is it the guy that they can best relate to? Is it the guy that picks things up quicker, that understands what they're looking at defensively fastest? What is it that separates the mental part? I ask that because one of the knocks on Corral is, well, he's always played in a one read system, and you look at college football, a lot of it is one read systems. It's it's a totally different game. You're trying to go fast and all of that. It's different than it is in the NFL. I know I just threw a lot at you, but when they sit down with those guys, how do they differentiate them? How do they ultimately come, to say, hey, this is the guy that we're going to use a first round draft choice on?
Leadership. I mean, that's the one thing that I think you don't hear a lot from the punditry and from, the draft nicks and that kind of thing. They don't talk. And I think that still is a highly valued trait in NFL locker rooms and in NFL war rooms and on draft day. I think it's got a lot to do with how is the team going to relate to this guy? Are they going to follow him? Is he going to mesh with everybody there? Is he going to mesh with our veterans? Are veterans going to want to follow him? And, it's almost impossible to put a number on that. But I think, from what I have seen and from what I hear from people is they're looking for that thing. And if they don't have it, you can fall. I think the quarterback out of UCLA, whose name escaped me, that was drafted, the same year as Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield and all those guys. And I think he was a young 1 year with the Cardinals, and then he went to the Dolphins for a while. I cannot remember what his name is, but I think that teams gave up on him quickly because he lacked the leadership they were looking for. He's kind of more of a bookish kind of guy, was trying to kind of steer where he wanted to go in the draft, and he really wasn't that kind of player. I'm so angry that I can't remember.
Now I know who you're talking about, and I can't think of his name either, which is probably a sign that his NFL career wasn't very good. That he just
that's definitely true because he really bounced around quickly. But what really surprised me is how quickly teams gave up on it, and I think that it had to do with that quality that was lacking. And so I think I don't think Baker Mayfield goes number one overall if not for that leadership quality. Now you can argue whether or not it was dumb to value that the way that they did, but I still think it's important. And I think that's really what separates a draft where we're going to see probably more quarterbacks go early than we should because of the rules. But as far as which ones go higher than others, I think it's got a lot to do with that.
A lot of people over the last couple of years have made a lot of about Matt Corral's maturation, and he absolutely has matured a lot over the last 2.5 years or so at Ole Miss. Another guy who has is Sam Williams. If you had asked me 2 years ago what's going to happen with Sam Williams, I'd have been like, man, he's going to get himself in trouble. This is not going to end well. And it's been the exact opposite of that. I mean, literally just Wednesday afternoon, I was talking to Sam Williams. He was holding his son. It's like he's a different person. And the lights have also come on for him as a football player. He looks incredible. He can get off the edge. He had a great senior season at Ole Miss. He sounds like he's worked his way into maybe the second round. And I'm curious when NFL teams, I know you can't speak for all 32 NFL teams, but when they look at a guy that had a little bit of a checkered past, appears to have really turned the corner and has the skill set you're looking for in the NFL. He can handle the run. He can get to the quarterback. Do they throw some of the past stuff away, or does that still kind of fester and haunt a little bit close to the draft?
Neal, there were a couple teams that I know of that had him off their board before the senior year started. Okay. And we don't have to run down the issues that he had, but they were real. I think he made a wise choice. He's got two things going for him. I think he made a wise choice with his choice on representation. He's with Sports Trust. You probably know Pat Dye. I think Pat's very well respected. And I think when he speaks, I think a lot of people listen. I think that helps. But number two, much more importantly, he plays an impact position. If you find a pass rusher and maybe he's got a few spots on him, but if he's an impact player and he can step right in and be a rotational guy for you that can really pressure the passer, you're going to roll the dice on it. That's all there is to it. If he's an off-ball linebacker or a guard or, a fullback or something, no way he gets drafted. As it is, you're right. Maybe he's a day two guy because he plays a very important position. I mean, cornerback, left tackle, defensive end, quarterback, maybe a wide receiver. Those are the places where you roll the dice these days. And he happens to play one of those positions. So I think he could have a good experience on draft day.
Just real quick with some of the other Ole Miss guys, Jerry Neal, I think, has a chance to go late day 2, early day 3, and then after that, it's about fit and whether a organization fell in love with a guy, whether it's Snoop Connor or Chance Campbell or whoever the case may be. Any Ole Miss guys kind of stick out in your mind as guys that you think could surprise a little bit from what you've seen?
We talked a little bit about Dontario Drummond before we got on here, and I think he's an interesting player. I know he didn't light the lamp as far as his 40, but I think he's got ability. I know there are a lot of people that were excited about him kind of before the whole draft process started. I think a team that's established needs a big kind of pass catcher that can move the chains and work between the hashes. He could surprise, despite the fact that, again, he wasn't lightning on the 40. But he's a player that could be interesting. He's the one that kind of jumps off the page to me just because of his length and his size and those kinds of things.
Real quick before I let you go, let's talk some NFL quarterback, NFL moves today. Over the last few days, I should say, on Wednesday, Tyreek Hill gets traded from Kansas City to Miami. Feels like that's kind of okay, Tua. You've got your weapons. It's now or never a little bit. Is that fair?
Well, Neal, I mean, to me, if there's anything that the last Super Bowl proved, it's that you've got to have an offense that can go, and it starts with your quarterback. Now, let's set Tua aside for a second. They went out and got a quality left tackle. He'll probably only play about a half season, but there'll be good games when he plays. And then they went out and got an impact wide receiver in a 24-hour period. At this point, if Tua doesn't make it happen, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Right.
But credit the Dolphins for going out and finding, they picked an apple off the Kyle Shanahan tree, and I think that's a wise move. They've got 2 impact receivers now, and they've got a quality left tackle who has trouble staying healthy, but he's really good when he plays. It's now or never time for Tua. There are no excuses left for Tua. I don't know what the answer is, and I haven't watched him enough to really have formed an opinion on him. Everyone was excited about him coming out of the draft, obviously. The ability's there, but so far he just hasn't really put it all together. I think we'll know very soon. And the way it is now, Neal, there's no shelf life for quarterbacks anymore. Either you hit almost instantly or they move on. And again, I think it's a byproduct of the way the rules are now and the way how offense kind of rules the game and all those kinds of things. If you want to compete, you've got to have a guy that is going to be able to make plays for you on Sunday and not just be a game manager. And we'll find out very soon if Tua is that guy or not in Miami.
What does this mean for the Chiefs that they walked away from Tyreek Hill? What does it say about their window? I mean, they win a Super Bowl and then they get back to a Super Bowl and they get, I guess, upset, for lack of a better word, by the Bucs. And then the Bengals beat them this year in Kansas City in the AFC title game. Is this a sign that there's some alarm there and that they're trying to move in a different direction? Or is this just, hey, we had to get value for Tyreek Hill?
Well, it's a lot of money to spend on a wide receiver. Ask the Saints, what their return on investment has been for Michael Thomas.
Good point.
That's number one. And number two, I think it's a reflection of this draft class. I mean, there's depth pretty much going down the 4th, 5th round with guys that could have been, let me back up, because of the depth of this draft class in general, with the COVID year and all the players that stuck around that would not have otherwise stuck around, there's depth at a lot of positions, no more so than at wide receiver. So you're seeing guys that are going to go day 3 that could easily have been day 2 guys in the past, maybe late day 1s, that because of so many guys stacked there and the perception that I can find a receiver later, they're going to hang around and they're going to be, quality players. I mean, you look at I think it was the 16 draft when, the 17 draft, Alvin Kamara, the Minnesota running back went, the Packers got a running back late. There's so many players that at that one position that were available, and the same I think is going to be true for wide receivers in this draft. And I think the Chiefs were able to anticipate that, and that's kind of why they made this move.
I know you're there in Houston. Deshaun Watson lands in Cleveland. What did you think of that move for the Browns?
Well, they're paying a lot of money guaranteed to a guy that I think is a bit of a wild card. And, look at what OBJ did when he went to Cleveland. I mean, when he got there, he was looked at kind of as a savior and it didn't end so well. Will it end that way in Cleveland? I don't know. I mean, I think to some degree Watson is going to have a halo for a while. We don't know how long he's going to be suspended. The number I hear the most is 6 games.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
So there are a lot of negatives, but at the same time, if you want to win, you've got to have a player like a Deshaun Watson. I mean, as I've said many times on this when I've been with you, I'm a Saints guy, and I was all in for them to go get him because if you don't have an impact guy, you're kind of competing for second place to me. And so I congratulate the Browns on really going for it. The package was big, but I didn't think it was crazy big. I mean, I think the Niners gave up more for Trey Lance, and Trey Lance is a wild card. I think Deshaun Watson is he's got a pretty promising future, and a guy that not only is a good player, but man, he's still in the first half of his career. He may be in the first quarter of his career.
Yeah.
So I don't blame them for doing what they did. I think it was a risky move, and they're taking a chance. At the same time, I think it's a chance they had to take.
So Matt Ryan goes to Indianapolis. You've got Russell Wilson in Denver. I give the NFL credit, man. I mean, they know how to spin the drama machine in the spring, right, to keep everybody interested. Baker Mayfield, as of this moment, doesn't really have a home. I guess he's
Crazy.
still with Cleveland, but that's not tenable, right? There's no way that Baker Mayfield shows up for camp in Cleveland knowing that Deshaun Watson's there. What happens with him? And is there one of those other guys that you think, hey, this change of scenery is going to really help?
I would look at Seattle for Baker. They've got a big fan of his in their front office that was in Cleveland when he was drafted. And I think that they feel like if he's got a good running game and enough weapons that maybe he could rejuvenate. I mean, we kind of had a 1 year on, 1 year off kind of career for Baker so far. And so maybe he's due for a year on. I don't know. I think he's an interesting player. And I think an argument could be made that his best football is still ahead of him. I don't know where that winds up being, but like I say, I would keep an eye on the Seahawks. I think he's a possibility. I think Russell Wilson was a steal for the Broncos. I like the moves the Broncos have made under George Payton, who's only been there for a year plus. Seems very wise, highly respected by people in the industry. I think, obviously Wilson struggled with injuries last year, and he's not nearly as young as Deshaun Watson is, but I still think he's got some football left in him. And I think he was derided a little bit because he was more or less running a campaign to get out of Seattle for the last few years. But I think that might have been a little bit overblown. I think that Russell Wilson's a guy that is a leader, and I think that matters. I like Matt Ryan. I think there are a lot of detractors out there, but you're talking about a guy that when he had an offensive line and he had weapons, he's a pretty dangerous player. And
Colts can really run the ball too. I mean, he's got some help now.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I'm a big fan of what the Colts have done generally. I mean, I credit them, even though it was turned out to be the wrong move. I credit them for going aggressively after Carson Wentz. I think there are a lot of arguments to be made on his behalf when that trade was made. But going after Matt Ryan, I think is a good move too. The only issue is, how long does it take for Matt Ryan to come in and learn that offense? I mean, Carson Wentz had a bit of a head start because of his background with the head coach there, but Matt Ryan doesn't have that. Will he be able to really figure it out in time to make an impact? Because, I mean, I think you're kind of talking about a 1 year proposition there. If he's not successful, they probably are looking around again, and maybe even draft a quarterback this year. That certainly wouldn't be out of the question. So, but I think he can have an impact there. I still think he's got some ability, obviously not for long, but I think he can still have 1 or 2 good years there.
All right, last thing, the Cincinnati Bengals come 3 minutes away or less, maybe a bad call on third down. They're close to the end zone from being Super Bowl champs in Joe Burrow's second season. They dip back into the LSU pool. They get Lyle Collins to step in and play tackle. They added a couple of really good interior linemen. Did that, offensive line was the weakness. You saw that throughout the playoffs. It almost cost them against the Titans. It almost cost them against the Chiefs. It did cost them against the Rams. Have they sufficiently addressed the offensive line to the point that they can get back and compete for another Super Bowl?
I think that the talent is there. The offensive line is one position where to me, it's the sum of the parts is a lot more than the individual talents. And so the question will be is how quickly can they knit them together and really make them a cohesive unit? I think there's a good chance they will. And I think also that they can game plan around it until that offensive line really can hit on all cylinders, and be smart about things. I like their chances. And again, I mean, I credit them for recognizing their weakness and really going out and improving it. The Chiefs did the same thing last year, obviously didn't want to get into the Super Bowl, but I do think that the Chiefs may have taken 1 step backward, but I think in the long run, they'll take 2 steps forward because they were aggressive about it. I think we don't know yet exactly if what the Bengals have done is going to be enough. I think it's a good start though. And I'll be interested to see if they continue to address things in the draft. There still are some. I think the jury's out on Jonah Williams as a tackle. I think the jury's still out on Jackson Carman as a guard. But these are guys that came in with good pedigrees, and they're still young. And if they can come together in a way that at least keeps Burrow from not being under assault all the time, that's probably enough to really make the Bengals a team that has a future in the AFC as a consistent Super Bowl contender.
It's the window. You go for it now, right? Because you've got Chase and Burrow on rookie deals. This is the time that you can stack your kind of do what Seattle did when Russell Wilson was on his rookie deal. I mean, this is the window to go for it. Of like if you need a cornerback and Stephon Gilmore's there, you go get him. There's people that you can, this is the window, because down the road 2-3 years, you're going to be paying Burrow God only knows how much, and probably Jamar Chase and maybe Joe Mixon and T. Higgins, whatever the case may be. So on one hand, you go, hey, this is this young team. We've got time. And on the other hand, you go, no, the window's now. Yeah.
I mean, look at the Chiefs. I don't think they trade Tyreek Hill if they didn't have to sign Patrick Mahomes to all that money. Yeah. And Mahomes' first year, I think, I don't have his contract in front of me, but as I recall, the first year was kind of low. But now going into this year, his cap number starts getting pretty sizable. And so, you've got the good news is you've got Patrick Mahomes. The bad news is you're gonna have to really draft well to surround him with enough talent to make an impact. And again, they're gonna be looking for rookie deal help from the wide receiver core. When you've got your quarterback on a rookie deal, man, it really makes things a lot easier, especially when it's a guy as talented as Burrow. So I agree. I think that the window does close sooner now because of the economics of the NFL. It's a fascinating league. They know how to stay in the headlines. They can use, like you said, the underwear Olympics and turn it into primetime programming. It's remarkable. They're the king. They're the king for a reason. Hey, speaking of, I really appreciate your time. I always enjoy following your work. People who want to keep up with what's going on with you and the latest, how do they get in touch with you? Just find us on Twitter at Inside the League. You can find a link to sign up for our Friday wrap, which comes out on Fridays. If you're interested in the game behind the game, I encourage you to check it out. It'll come out at 7:30 Eastern every Friday. We talk about what's going on. This week we'll talk about maybe the other side of the David Ojabo, whatever, injury. And I think there's a perception out there that scouts are cold and uncaring because of the Bucky Brooks comment on Twitter. There's a lot more to that story that needs to be told, and we kind of are going to start telling that on Friday. We also have a blog, which is Succeed in Football. If you're interested in how scouts get hired and how agents work and all those kind of things, you might check that out. Of course, the mothership is InsideTheLeague.com as well. Love to have anyone. You can contact us button if you have questions about the game. We try to be very responsive. DMs are open on Twitter as well. Neal, thanks again as always. I know you're busy, so enjoy keeping up with the draft, and we'll maybe hopefully touch base with you closer to it. Sounds great, brother. Appreciate it. Always available. Love it. All right, buddy. Bye. That was Neal Stratton. As always, thanks for his time talking NFL. The draft about a month away. Speaking of, we talked about the Atlanta Falcons, the Atlanta Braves, some SEC football here with Dan Mathews of 680 The Fan out of Atlanta. Here's Dan. My friend Dan Mathews, 680 The Fan in Atlanta, kind enough to join us here. Dan, how are you?
Oh, very well. How are we today?
Man, I'm good. So we're taping this on Wednesday evening. People are going to see it on Thursday. So I always do that because people get confused on today, yesterday, all that stuff. But on Wednesday afternoon, I saw the Falcons brass. Arthur Smith was here. I think a couple other guys were here as well. Obviously, I'm sure they were watching a number of guys, but let's face it, all eyes were on Matt Corral, the Ole Miss quarterback. You obviously weren't here to see that, so I won't ask you about, hey, what'd you think of Matt's performance? But instead, I'll go here. The Falcons make a move at quarterback. They trade Matt Ryan, who'd been in Atlanta for, forever. It seems like he's headed to Indianapolis. So short-term and long-term, what's the Falcons' plan at quarterback now that Matty Ice is gone?
Well, short-term, I think that it is probably Marcus Mariota, at least in terms of the what you got, in terms of what you don't. And I know that Arthur Smith, when the media met with them, it's funny you say, you're talking about them being at Ole Miss Pro Day. They had told us that as soon as we got off the media call with them, they were heading to the airport and they were going to Oxford. And so they were going to be in Oxford on Wednesday. And then Thursday, I believe they were going to go watch Desmond Ridder. So long-term, I almost wonder if there is a edict from a high there in the building in Flowery Branch, which is just outside of Atlanta, where the Falcons practice, from Arthur Blank. Hey, find me a new quarterback, because for the last 14 years of life had been good. Life had been very good, where there's not every single NFL team that can look around and say, franchise guy, we got him. We got our quarterback, despite what some in the fan base might think of the guy. So they were living a pretty charmed life for a while. And I think that if nothing else, Arthur Smith, from what we saw last week with the Deshaun Watson flirtation, that it is very much a point of emphasis this April in the draft for Terry Fontenot and his scouting and development staff to find the next guy. And I know that there's a lot of people who say, well, don't do it this year, because aside from a couple of guys, there's really nobody that can fit that role. Wait until next year when Bryce Young is out and CJ Stroud is out and a handful of other guys are out for the draft. That's when you want to capitalize on that. But it'll be interesting to see what they do come April. Such
a gamble, the whole wait for next year thing. It's like I'm a Thunder fan, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're as we're taping this, they're getting ready to play the Orlando Magic, and nobody's playing. I mean, they are desperately trying to lose because they're trying to move up, and people are like, sure, well, can you tank another year? Because Wembanyama is out a year from now, and it's like, it doesn't work like that. It's so hard to forecast what's going to happen to your team, much less the other teams, for the better part of another season, right? So you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So you have to strike when you can, which leads to my question about the Falcons. If they go quarterback this year, do you get an early sense as to which one they like the most? Would they be willing to move up in the draft? That kind of thing. Do they like one of these guys enough to say, hey, this is my guy, I'm going to go get him?
Yeah, I haven't heard enough yet. I mean, I know that they were at Malik Willis's pro day up at Liberty, and a lot of people were singing his praises and saying how he looked. I hadn't had a chance to see the one that you were at on Wednesday with Matt Corral to see how he looked. I know that there weren't any concerns with the ankle after he hurt it in the Sugar Bowl, which didn't seem like there was going to be a lot of concerns with that. But
he looks really healthy, by the way.
There you go. I mean, that's what the agent's paying for you to go work out in Florida or Arizona or California during this time. That's what it sets you up to be.
It's the magic of the NFL, is that they all kind of work together, even though they're all trying to kill each other. It was a 67 throw workout, and so much of it was rolling out, rolling to his left, rolling to his right. They're like, hey, if you've got an ankle problem, you're not going to hide it from us. Right. We're going to find out. And Matt's ankle appeared to be fine. I mean, and the rest of his game has always been unquestioned: the quick release, the big arm, all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I mean, I guess if nothing else, you're exactly right. I mean, there are no secrets when it comes to this time of the year. Everybody, I mean, that's why the thing that cracks me up the most at pro days is when you see all the scouts circle around each other with their clipboards. All right, you got 4.5 for this one. What did you get? 4.6. All right, what'd you get? So you're exactly right. I mean, all the information, I guess they kind of feel like is for everyone. But I do get the sense that if nothing else, if they feel like that their guy is there, or even if they have to move up. Now, here's the caveat with them. I think we can agree that in the NFC South right now, there's a team in front of them that's drafting in front of them, the Carolina Panthers. They're going to want a quarterback as well. And I think that that's going to be something that they have to weigh. Just with how aggressive they've been and the amount of draft picks that the Falcons have. I believe as of right now, and I could be wrong, 9 picks at this minute right now. So they had shown under Thomas Dimitroff that they would be very aggressive, especially in the first rounds, trading up, not back. We have not necessarily seen as much, from the one draft of Terry Fontenot. I think last year he kind of wanted to play it straight and then, go from there and kind of feel out how the draft process is and then go. So maybe this year he will be a little bit more aggressive. But, again, I can't help but think if Malik Willis is there, because granted too, here's the other thing. And some people can say money, only care about money, only care about selling tickets. Arthur Blank needs to get a star player on this team, because Kyle Pitts is a good enough player. He's not the star just yet. That's why they made such a strong push for Deshaun Watson, because of all the things off the field, Deshaun Watson could sell tickets.
Yeah.
If he was able to get what the ESPN story had said too about being able to get, I believe, Jarvis Landry and Leonard Fournette to join up with him and come play with the Falcons, if indeed that had happened before the Cleveland Browns had come through with their massive contract offer, then that would have sold tickets. So a guy who played his high school ball here in the Atlanta area, finished up at Roswell High School, and has gone on to be a pretty big star at Liberty, and somebody who at the Senior Bowl and now here in his pro day circuit, Malik Willis, that's somebody that I think if he's right there, it's going to be really tough for Arthur Blank to pass up.
Was there disappointment in Atlanta when Watson went to Cleveland?
Yes, there was. I mean, there's such a fatalistic feeling amongst the fan base here for all the teams that if anything remotely bad happens, it's got to be either it's Atlanta or Georgia sports, or now the newest one, because we can't rely on curses anymore, is the Braves winning the world title and the Dogs winning the national championship.
It's an embarrassment of riches right now.
It sacrificed everything. So a charmed life that Braves and Dog and Atlanta and state of Georgia fans are living right now.
Yeah, because I mean, come on, the Braves win the World Series in a season where at the midway point they're just sort of meandering through the season, and then Georgia points at a season, gets it done, wins it, beats Nick Saban, all that stuff. Come on, I mean, curses.
We'll take it.
Yeah, I would think so. All right, let's switch to the Braves real quick. I'm curious to get your thoughts. They win a World Series and do it in a season where Ronald Acuna goes down with a knee injury, and at the time when that injury happened, I thought, well, they're done. They're going to sell. And they didn't. They bought. They went out and got Jorge Soler and Jock Peterson, and it really, the whole thing just sort of came together. It just they caught fire. It was kind of like magic, sort of a little bit. And Freddie Freeman was the face of that team for the better part of a decade, I guess. I mean, Freddie Freeman was Mr. Brave.
Oh yeah.
Tell me from your perspective, kind of what went down, and then what has the reaction been in Atlanta to Freddie Freeman leaving for Los Angeles and the Braves trading for Matt Olson and giving him an 8-year deal?
Yeah, I mean, just from everything that happened. So the deal went down with Matt Olson last Monday, and we were on the air when it happened, broke the news. Shea Langoliers and Christian Pache and the package that went to Oakland for Matt Olson. So, of course, when that happened, immediately we started taking calls on the air of goodbye, Freddie Freeman, because we knew that's exactly what it was. You're not going to give him the money that it sounds like he is commanding, and eventually what he got from the Los Angeles Dodgers, to platoon at first base and to be at DH. That's just irresponsible. You're not going to do that. So when that happened, I mean, you saw the reaction of Alex Anthopoulos down there. I mean, I really do think that was a genuine response of, this is a tough day, that we didn't necessarily want to be in this spot. The players, when I was down there, the clubhouse seemed the same. And I was down in Northport where the Braves are for spring training. The clubhouse seemed loose, relaxed, genuine, the way that it had been really a couple of years before when we were able to be in the clubhouse. I mean, this is the first time, granted, off topic, we've been able to be around these guys in person again and be in the clubhouse. So I did not sense any, woe is us, this sucks. And especially too, when he signed with the Dodgers, it still seemed like, hey, they got a good club. We got a good club. Let's see what happens if we face each other in October. But as the fan base, though, it's really kind of funny, Neal, because in the age of Twitter, and granted, I get it, not everybody's on Twitter. And of course, Twitter is going to get the worst of the worst reactions. I mean, no matter if everybody is universally liked, a bot is going to come out and say you suck, all those different things. You had a lot of people who were saying Freddie chose money over a legacy in Atlanta, and a lot of people who were pretty upset with them about that. I caution those people all the time that Freddie signed a pretty long-term deal. Now, granted, it was coming out of, the arbitration and everything. So he was getting quite a pay raise. Don't feel bad for the guy, but he re-upped back at the beginning of his career when John Coppola in the front office were not making any bones about it. We ain't going to win for a while. This is going to be a few years of us selling off players and building up our farm system and getting ourselves in position to have 2021 be eventually what it was. So I think that there was probably a majority of the fan base that had said, hey, man, go get your money. We hope it's here in Atlanta, but if it's not, go get it. You had some of the fan base, good riddance. You're selfish. You want the money. You wanted to go to LA, New York, all these places all along. So there was that as well.
He's from Southern California. There was
right.
always that belief that maybe he would want to go back there.
Right.
I'm sentimental as a sports fan. I try not to be, because I know it's a business and we work in the business and we get it.
Sure.
But man, you know, I always loved the idea of Anthony Rizzo being a Cub for 18 years and walking away, and, you know, Chris Bryant and you love the idea of a Freddie Freeman being a Brave his entire career, but it's just not. The Derek Jeter career is not common. It's not realistic. And in today's economics and such, you know, what's interesting, and I want to get your thoughts here, is I thought Anthopoulos did the right thing ultimately by, hey, we'll give you 5 years. At the end of that contract, we're probably going to have a little regret, but you've done a lot for us and you're the face of the franchise and all that. By not buckling and just giving him what he wanted, he ultimately got a better deal with a younger player who puts up very similar numbers than Olsen.
Well, I think, and that's to a great point there, Neal, is that if he goes ahead and caves in to Scott Boras and the contract demands that they want, then you probably don't have Kenley Jansen here right now. You might not have Eddie Rosario back on a 2-year deal. And they made a run at Jorge Soler. Jorge Soler eventually got more money from the Miami Marlins. So it worked out well for him in that regard. So, you know, I think that what they were able to parlay this into has, again, the majority of Braves fans ecstatic about it. A couple of things that I want to point the listeners, in this case, the viewers of me and you on today's show too, is number one, we had Chipper Jones on our afternoon show on 6A The Fan on Friday. And he talked about this, and anybody that knows the relationship between Chipper and Freddie, it's as close as can be. And that is a friendship that is not only, you know, a very good and close friendship, but it's also a friendship of, it was the guy who kind of shepherded him along when he was a younger player. And in 2012, when Chipper stepped aside, kind of passed the torch to Freddie and said, this is your franchise now. Kind of like what we saw after Drew Brees when we knew he was going to retire. Remember on the sidelines, he pointed to Jameis Winston and said, it's your team now. You know, kind of did that same thing. And I think that one thing that really stood out to me with Chipper was that he had talked about it with Freddie. And I think that this was in the only piece as well, of when he had rejected the 5 for 135, he told Freddie straight up, he said, you're playing a dangerous game, because you're wanting to dance with the Dodgers, you're wanting to dance with the Yankees, the Red Sox, even the Rays, whoever it is out there. They're not going to wait for you, and they can't wait for you. And that's, I think, in Freddie's mind, if I had to take a guess, I think that he thought that eventually emotions would play through, that Anthopoulos and the Braves would be like, we're screwed if we lose everybody, if we don't get Olsen, primarily number one, if we don't bring back Freddie. But if we don't do that, we don't get Olsen, or at the very least, like a Rizzo or somebody like that, we're in real trouble. And I think that Anthopoulos, once he got that hour, you know, you have an hour to respond to us of a contract offer from Freeman's side, he said, you know what, I'm not going to play these games. I'm going to take it, you know, for our team, and I'm going to call Oakland. And he did, and he worked out a deal to get Olsen here. And I thought that this was interesting too. I can't remember who had this, but that he knew, you know, that morale in the clubhouse was going to be down, because I wasn't there on that Monday, but I do understand it was a little bit down around Braves camp that day. But then that Tuesday, I think it picked up a little bit, because you had Olsen introduced, but also too, they introduced the 8-year contract extension with Olsen as well, to let you know, hey, one of the best first basemen in baseball, he's going to be here for some time. And
a hometown kid and all of that stuff. And I mean, Olsen's a terrific player, and Freeman is too, but you know, like, you know, this isn't about the Cubs. I don't want to make it about the Cubs. I have a tendency to make everything about the Cubs. But like Rizzo, our dog's name Rizzo. I love Anthony Rizzo. I mean,
I do too.
I mean, he was great, right? And I'll never forget 2015 and 2016 and the magic that was that in my house and stuff. Was, you know, my kids were so excited for me that my loser franchise that I'd spent my whole life cheering for won the World Series, you know, and he caught the last ball and stuff. But but he started having back problems and little stuff. And you looked at it and you're like, God, you give this guy a 5-year contract, and at the end of the contract, are you going to be going, you used to be great, but you're not great. And I get it. I understand the business of it. And in Anthony Rizzo's case, I think by not taking the Cubs deal, he left a lot of money on the table that I don't know that he'll ever get back. And I wish him nothing but goodwill in New York. I mean, I'm the guy that when Rizzo comes up, I'm like, hey, Rizzo's up, we're going to watch, even though it's not a Cub anymore. But it's why I'm interested to see what happens when Freeman comes back. My guess is that the Braves fans stand and give him quite the ovation and all of that stuff. But I think in the long run, everybody may have won there. And I'm an Anthopoulos fan. I just think the guy acknowledges the sentimental part of the game, the emotional part of the game, but also the business and analytics part of the game, and looks at Freddie Freeman and goes, in the 5th and 6th year of a deal, it might be a really bad deal for us, because Freddie Freeman, like Anthony Rizzo, if you look at it carefully enough, you can see the beginnings of some aging, and it's a long season, Major League Baseball. And when those big bodies start to break down a little bit, sometimes those deals turn into nightmares.
Yeah, no, it definitely. And I think you're right. I mean, they're going to come to Truist Park in June, and I can only, guess and almost guarantee that the Braves, being the way that the franchise is, they're going to make it first class. It's going to be red carpet. I'm sure Chelsea Freeman, his wife, Charlie, his son, and the 2 other young boys, I'm sure they'll be there. They're very grateful to the Braves, and the Braves are to them as well. So I think that he's going to get the whole treatment. The ring, from Brian Snitker, I'm sure will give him the box right there, and he'll probably be able to have the treatment that only a few guys get in baseball, where when you're announced up to the plate, and it's one of those, the catcher, the umpire goes and dusts off the plate to kind of give you some time, and I'm sure Darno will tell him, hey, step out a little bit, man. Tip the crowd. Do all that. I guarantee you that he'll get that as well. But no, I mean, I think that. One of the guys that I told you about that, told people to go read his stuff on this was Buster Olney. We had him on last week, and he brought up a great point of that the Braves situation was almost incredibly identical to Albert Pujols in St. Louis after the 2011 season. And that it was kind of that, where it was, all right, this guy's a little on in age. Do we want to, platoon there for a couple of years and then eventually get a guy like Paul Goldschmidt? Or do you want to give Albert the huge contract, and all of a sudden starts to break down a little bit? He's not hitting in the 320s. He's not hitting the tape measure shots as much anymore, all those different types of things. It's a bad place to be. And I think that it's funny enough, we're seeing a Major League Baseball now become what the NFL did a few years ago with the hard salary cap. And that is that the NFL became there's 2 things that are incredibly dangerous: older and expensive. And in baseball now, it's kind of the same deal, that with the premium that is placed on draft, develop and bring up your own guys, or even make savvy trades for prospects and be able to develop them along, that the cheaper option is always the better one. And I know that that's what the players were fighting for too, to try to cut into that a little bit and say, hey, come on, have these owners spend some money on these teams instead of breaking it all the way down and building it back up. So I think that it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see. I mean, we're going to get to see Braves Dodgers part 1 in April out there in Los Angeles. That's going to be fun. That's a great place for a series. If you ever have a chance to get out to Dodger Stadium. And then of course, part 2 in June, once schools are out and everything back here in Atlanta. So I think both series are going to be a pretty tough ticket to come by.
Yeah, no question. All right, talk about the Braves. The new face of that organization now is Ronald Acuna Jr., and he had the knee injury, and you and I were joking about the fact that our knees would not have bounced back as quickly as his has. He's going to DH for a while, but sounds like he's going to be in the field a little earlier than maybe they expected when camp first started.
Yeah, I was reading today. I don't know if Alex Anthopoulos just told this to Dave O'Brien of The Athletic, or if this was in a scrum. I can't remember where exactly the source is, but was reading one of O'Brien's tweets that apparently early May is now a possibility for him to be back out into the field. And I was talking about it with a couple of guys today would that mean that almost immediately out of spring training here in 2 or 3 weeks that he immediately goes on a rehab assignment, which I would have to believe that's probably it. That you start sending them to Rome for Class A, or to Mississippi for AA ball, and then eventually get him through Gwinnett before you get him up to the major league level. But I know that they were really trying to take it as cautiously as possible. But I also think, though, too, when you got a player like Acuna, I think, Snit had a good line last week, Brian Snitker, that, well, if they're up to him, he'd be out there right now, So it just shows you how much of a gamer he is. But no, I think it's encouraging that they're starting to feel more and more comfortable with having him back sooner rather than later, because there are some people, again, the Twitter crowd, and somebody tried to tell me, well, they won the World Series without Ronald Acuna last year. Do we really need him? I said, 1,000 times out of 1,000, you need Ronald Acuna in your lineup if you're going to go for another World Series. So
if the Braves are giving him away, I can think of a team.
I was going to say, I think there'd be plenty of suitors out there. If the Braves all of a sudden said, we don't need Ronald Acuna. So
29 of them.
I had a lot of people who had my back and not necessarily them, as they call that in the Twitter world. That was a ratio for him because number 13 being at the top of the order in this Braves lineup, that makes that team always better.
He's a fantastic player.
He's awesome.
When you look at that division, so Philadelphia went out and they got Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber to really bolster that lineup. That is an explosive lineup in Philadelphia, along with, obviously Bryce Harper and some of those guys. The Mets went out and added pitching big time. I mean, they're the top of their rotation it's eye popping. The Marlins are getting better, although I don't think they're a contender. So look at the East for a minute. Can the Braves repeat? Is this their division to win, or is it going to be a tough slog?
They're definitely the favorite. I mean, I think that top to bottom, Neal, they are the most balanced out team. I mean, the only real concern with the Braves right now are the 4 and 5 spots in the starting rotation. And I think there's a lot of people who say, if your only real concern is the 4 or 5 spots in the starting rotation, then I don't really think you have much of a concern. So that would be one right there. The back end of the bullpen is unbelievable. I mean, you saw how quickly that became a strength last October. They don't win the World Series without just how lights out that back end of the bullpen was, with Matzik, with Mentor, with Will Smith, who had gotten a lot of criticism last year for how he had closed out games. And also, too, you add Darren O'Day back in, who was a really huge piece for them. And, oh, by the way, you add an all-star closer who had been getting it done out on the West Coast with the Los Angeles Dodgers now, and Kenley Jansen, who is going to be the everyday closer. That's already been decided when they decided to bring him in. But the lineup is going to be outstanding. This is going to be a lineup that scores a lot of runs. It's going to be a lineup that hits a lot of home runs. That's going to be exciting. With the Phillies are they're going to be able to score some runs. I don't think there's any doubt about that. That's a heck of a lineup there. And when you play a lot of your games in that home ballpark up there in Philadelphia, especially when the weather warms up, you start getting a lot of home runs and you start getting a lot of runs. I think that their problem remains the same, though. I think the back end of the bullpen is still a little bit of a concern for them. I think the starting rotation is not 100% there. Conversely, I think with the Mets, you mentioned it with Scherzer and DeGrom. I mean, they're outstanding. But I wonder about the offense with the Mets.
Yeah.
The Nationals, I think the Nationals are kind of in like that really weird no man's land right now, where they're kind of like, do we want to try to build this up to contend, or do we want to kind of start to hit the reset a little bit? Because it sounds like, at least from the reports we heard of the contract offer to Juan Soto, is that he was not too keen on being a Washington National long-term. So if that's the case, then
can you imagine the market for that guy?
It's going to be unbelievable.
God,
it's going to be unbelievable. The moment I became a believer in him is when I saw him take Garrett Cole in the World Series onto the train tracks. Mind you, he's a left-handed hitter. Taking Garrett Cole opposite field onto the train tracks, I said, yep, that guy's legit. And, so
might
we'll see
get-
what the Marlins do.
He might be the guy that gets the first $500 million deal.
He could be. I was just about to say that he might break $500 million. It's a possibility. I mean, he's got it all. So I think right now, though, if you really, really pinch me for who I think the contenders are in the East, I think that it is obviously the Braves, number one. I would put the Phillies ahead of the Mets just from the bats. I think that they're slightly just with the bats, and it's become such an offensive league now in baseball that they're probably the next best threat. And then the Mets, obviously with what they have with the starting rotation there. So it's going to be a fun summer again, as it always is. But I like the Braves in the East.
All right, last thing. I spent some time on your show earlier in the week. We talked a lot of Ole Miss football, some college football. It's never goes away in the South, as you know.
No.
Georgia just won a national title. Kirby now going to defend the title. Kirby Smart. It's super early, and there's a lot of time left before we all get together in Atlanta for media days and stuff. But when you look at the SEC, what do you sort of expect going into the season? Is it still Alabama and Georgia at the top and everybody else just kind of clawing, or do you see some programs that are closing in on them?
I think that probably, if you put the SEC media days ballot in front of me right now, it's probably Alabama and Georgia. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You see the team that Alabama has coming back. I mean, they almost got everybody back from last year's team. Now, we've been cautioned with Nick Saban teams in the past when they've had that, because I think anytime that Nick Saban has a lot of players coming back, he immediately starts to have nightmares of 2010. I don't think this team's going to have nightmares of 2010 because A, I think that they're way too talented, but B, I also think that he's a much better coach than he was back then, where now he can go through that experience and see the warning signs of complacency and resting on laurels and all those different things. And I think that, as we've seen with Nick Saban teams, when they lose a national title or they lose any type of big game, what necessarily happens next, Neal? We've seen it numerous times. You usually don't get them twice in a row.
That fourth quarter in Indianapolis is going to run on a loop in Tuscaloosa. Those kids are going to see that fourth quarter because Georgia kicked their ass in the fourth quarter. And they're going to see it over and over and over. That's going to be motivation for that team.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, and that's the thing, too, is, I mean, you think that Nick Saban necessarily liked shaking Kirby Smart's hand and telling him you kicked our ass in the fourth quarter? I mean, that probably eventually, after he did that, the smirk kind of immediately went to a scowl of, yep, that's not going to happen again for us. So I think that those are probably the two. The team that I'm interested in the East, I really am interested to see if Tennessee can bounce back from last year in terms of being able to build on what they did last year. I think that's going to be a question for them. The defensive questions that were last year, I think they're amplified a little bit more this year with the lack of depth that they have at certain positions, primarily linebacker. But I think with Hendon Hooker, he is somebody that gives you a chance. I'm interested to see what Spencer Rattler can do at South Carolina.
Yeah.
And if that offense can get on track, and if Shane Beamer can really start to kind of harken back to those early 2010s of South Carolina football and be able to have them as a competitive program again, because I don't know about you, I thought it was fun when Steve Spurrier had that thing going in Williams-Brice Stadium at night with the fireworks and the sandstorm and everything like that. It was a pretty fun
Beamer did a great job last year. That was not a good team.
No,
they won 7 games with that team. That was a remarkable accomplishment.
Yeah, no, that definitely was an outstanding team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Excited to see your guys with all the transfers. Ole Miss. I mean, I think that they're a team that brings in a lot of talent, and the question's going to be at quarterback with Altmaier and with Jackson Dart as well to see who eventually is able to step forward for them. I think this is going to be an interesting year for Arkansas. And here's what I mean. I've said it numerous times on air that I think that in a way, Sam Pittman has kind of become the SEC's Dabo, where he's building a program there where at Clemson, seemingly for the longest time, if you're an assistant coach there is no real motivation for you to leave. You seemingly are able to do your job and do it exactly the way that you want to do it. It sounds like from everybody I talk with in Fayetteville, that's the same deal, that Barry Odom is able to call his defense. Kendall Briles is able to call his offense. I'm interested to see how this offense looks this year with Kendall Briles, because I think that he's got a really good one in KJ Jefferson. And also, too, with Jaden Hazelwood coming over, I think that that's a huge pickup for them. And,
it's interesting.
And a good offensive line, too, for that Arkansas Razorbacks team. What's the thing we know that when Arkansas was really good, it was when they were really good on the line.
It's funny you say that about Arkansas, because I've had this conversation with some people, because Ole Miss has been so dynamic in the portal that I think it overshadowed the fact that Pittman at Arkansas was very similar with the with not to the numbers, and they didn't get the kind of guys that Ole Miss got, but like they went out and added a bunch of guys in the portal, had a lot of turnover, had a lot of guys leave in the portal, brought a bunch of guys into the portal. Shane Beamer was active in the portal. It wasn't just Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin gets the headlines because they had probably the best transfer portal class.
Sure.
But if you look around the league, there were 4 or 5 programs that were right there with them in terms of, yeah, this is the way to do this. At Arkansas, much like Ole Miss, you're not going to recruit a bunch of 5-star kids to go to Fayetteville. You don't have the NIL money with the A&M has, that Texas has. But you can get kids that maybe weren't getting the playing time where they were, and get them to come there and say, hey, come here for 1 year, 2 years, prove yourself, go to the league, and
right.
we'll get you a little bit of NIL or whatever. And Arkansas has done that. I'm with you. The West is full of really interesting stories, and they're kind of one of them.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see in the West, too, is there a possibility that the league beats up on itself this year? Because I think the other two questions that you have in the West are both that talent is not necessarily an issue, and that's at LSU, because I've said it numerous times that it's never going to be a question of talent in Baton Rouge. It's going to be a question of, do they have good enough coaching? In 2019, they had good enough coaching in spite of the head coach. They had other coaches on that staff that were able to lead that program, and we've seen it now with what Dave Aranda's been able to do at Baylor. I think that the question for LSU is, can they get back to their identity of being a tough, physical football team? I think that over the last couple of years, at least the physicality part of it, I think especially offensively, they lost that a little bit, because even in 2019, when they were throwing it all over the place with Joe Burrow and the Joe Brady offense was going the way it was, Neal, you can back me up on this or push back either way. When they needed to run the football, they could run the football.
Oh, absolutely.
The last couple of years, I'm not so sure that that's the case. How many times last year in short yardage situations, 3rd or 4th down, did we see LSU get pushed back? And you're probably thinking to yourself, the hell does this happen to LSU? I can't remember many years seeing that. For Texas A&M, look, I think that the number one thing, if I'm an Aggie fan, is yes, you've been to a New Year's Six bowl game. All right, check that box. Getting to Atlanta is a huge thing for them. This is a very important year for Jimbo at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Because I think if I'm an A&M fan, I look at what he has done to this point with the quarterback position, and I kind of look around and go, I thought that's what you are. Like, I thought you're supposed to be the quarterback whisperer. So everybody I talk with, though, says he's going to have a chance because they really like what they have in Haynes King. I understand before he got hurt last year, he was far and away the guy over Zach Calzada. And I think we saw numerous instances last year why that was the case. They're very high on that Connor Weigman kid, the kid out of the Houston area. I know that, somebody had brought up Quinn Ewers, and they said, no, they weren't even entertaining Quinn Ewers. It was all Connor Weigman. And I've been told that a real wild card in this, don't sleep on Max Johnson, that I think that if nothing else, that might be the route that Jimbo goes, kind of to what I was just talking about, getting the quarterback position really jump-started there, of a guy that has shown you some really good things, and he's going to have a good group to work with there in College Station. So I'm with you. I think that in the East, there's far less questions about teams that can compete. Because I just don't think that most of them, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, I don't think they're there yet, Florida. But in the SEC West, you're 100% right. It's once you get to that SEC West schedule this year, it's not going to be an easy week.
That's why if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm worried. They've got some talent, sure, because they're Auburn, but they don't have nearly the kind of talent that they normally have. And now you have some fractions and stuff, and you've got Calzada coming in as probably your quarterback, and people have seen him and people have seen Finley. There's not an intimidation factor. And you look around at the division, and obviously Alabama's head and shoulders above Auburn. A&M is too. Ole Miss is. I think Arkansas is.
Yeah.
And then LSU is going to be a first-year coach with Brian Kelly, and people can make fun of the dancing and stuff, and I do, and Lane Kiffin's made fun of it and all that, but Brian Kelly wins everywhere he goes.
He
and
does.
So it's really, and I don't know what I think about Mississippi State. You got Rodgers coming back for another season, so you've got a veteran quarterback, you've got a lot of guys, and I know ESPN, the F&P or whatever, is high on them. I just can't go. I don't know. I'm not. I got to see more, but
Sure.
But if I'm Auburn, you mentioned if I'm sitting in Atlanta today with my ballot in front of me, I know I'm putting Alabama 1, and I know I'm putting Auburn 7.
Yeah.
And given all that's going on with Brian Harsin and such, that has a chance to be pretty explosive. Maybe in the wrong year to have a lot of trauma, because this is a division that can eat you up.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, you're exactly right. I think that there is an opportunity for this Auburn team to be shades of 2012. And what happened in 2012? They moved on from Gene Chizik and they brought in Gus. If that happens, because one thing that we're already starting to see happen as well is they're losing their grip on recruiting. Yeah. I mean, this is a program that makes their bread and butter of being able to get players from the coastal Alabama area. I mean, lower Alabama, and then Southwest Georgia, LaGrange, Columbus, those areas like that. They're able to get a lot of guys. They'll dip into Florida, Texas, other places, Atlanta as well, in the state of Georgia. But everybody I've talked with, and Neal, I know you talk with a lot of people as well. It just sounds like Harsin in year one did himself no favors with high school coaches in the area.
It's putting it
no
mildly.
favors. Yeah. I mean, and I can't imagine taking over a program like Auburn and, if not burning bridges, at least getting off to an awkward first impression with high school coaches, because I would feel like the number one thing I want to do is let them know, like, hey, our program is here for you. Use us as a resource. We'd love to help you. We want to keep this, this line of communication going. And we all know that, people joke about it all the time of, being a head coach in this part of the country. Being able to play the game in recruiting and politics is as much a part of this job as being able to put 11 guys on offense and 11 guys on defense and being able to put the ball through the uprights and special teams. It's as important as that. And if they have a bad season this year, we already saw them get into the red zone of possibly moving on from him this year.
Deep into the red zone.
Yeah. They have a bad season and it's just looking terrible. They're going to have no problem getting rid of Brian Harsin.
Hey, you've been really generous with your time. Thank you so much. It's always fun catching up with you. Appreciate it. Hope to catch up with you again soon as the summer moves along.
Absolutely, man. And, love the work you do and always great to catch up with you. And of course, can I give a plug?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, please. So Southern Sports Today app is where you can listen to the Chuck Oliver Show if indeed you don't have a Chuck Oliver Show affiliate near where you live. So we are on the app 24/7. You missed the show when we were on daily, you can go back and listen to the full 2 hours that way. You can also find my podcast on there that my man Neal was just on with me to talk some Ole Miss spring ball and everything of the sort. The Southern Beat podcast is there on the Southern Sports Today app as well. So always good, man, and look forward to seeing and talking with you again soon.
Me too. Keep it up. I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Again, that was Dan Mathews. Thanks to him for his time on the show tonight. That does it for this edition of Hand Raised Guys. Again, brought to you by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. Same great products, same great service, same great people, just different names. Again, if you're in Oxford or Tupelo, that area, get in touch with the people at Comer. If you're in Hernando, DeSoto County, that area, get in touch with the people at Southern. The number's there on the screen. We will be back with you on Monday morning with an edition of the Oxford Exxon podcast. Again, Ole Miss baseball against Tennessee this weekend at home. Ole Miss has a good number of unofficial visitors coming in. One official visitor, Quincy Riley from Middle Tennessee, the transfer portal cornerback. A lot of stuff in a war room brought to you by the Oxford Crystal. That's up at rebelgrove.com. I'll be out at the Manning Center early on Saturday, hopefully talking to some recruits about their visit. And then we'll have practice observations up on Saturday afternoon. Ole Miss practices around 11:15 on Saturday morning in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. That practice is open to the public. I'll have 10 Weekend Thoughts brought to you by Game Changer Patch Company up on Sunday, and we'll be back with another week of podcast and more here at MPW Digital starting on Monday. So again, thanks to Kendall Rogers, thanks to Dan Mathews, thanks to Neal Stratton for their time on the show tonight. Thanks to all of you for making us a part of your week, and we'll talk to you again on Monday. I'm Neal McCready. Good night.